The announcement. Benjamin Callahan, known to the world as Benny, was not the kind of man who blended into the background. At 81, he still filled every room he walked into with an air of authority that made strangers stand straighter, and his children shrink a little in guilt. His back was only slightly bent with age. His blue eyes were still as sharp as ice, and his voice carried the weight of decades spent commanding crews of men on construction sites from Chicago to San Francisco. He hadn't been born into money. Far from it. In 1944, in a tiny Iowa farmhouse with more cracks in the walls than insulation, Benny had entered a world where survival depended on grit. His father was a factory worker who lost 2 fingers to a machine press. His mother kept the family alive by stitching clothes for neighbors. By the time Benny was 12, he was already working part-time after school, hauling crates at the local general store. Summers were spent in the blistering sun, detasseling corn for a few cents an hour. But if poverty hardened him, it also fueled him. He promised himself he would never be poor again. At 17, with nothing but a rusty pickup and a borrowed set of tools, he started taking odd construction jobs. A porch here, a repaired roof there. By 25, he had his own crew. By 35, Callahan Construction had contracts with the state to build sections of interstate highway. By 50, his company had grown into one of the largest privately owned construction firms in the Midwest. He worked like a machine, 12, sometimes 16 hours a day, pushing through injuries and stress. His reward was staggering wealth. By the 1980s, Benny was a multimillionaire, owning property in Chicago, Dallas, and Miami. He had stocks, bonds, and accounts fat enough to guarantee his family's comfort for generations. And that was the problem. Benny's children never knew struggle. His eldest son, Michael Callahan, had gone to Yale in the 1970s, funded entirely by his father. Michael studied business management but was more interested in fraternity, parties than balance sheets. After graduation, he bounced from one failed startup to another, always using his father's name and money as collateral. Each time he failed, he came crawling back with a new scheme. "Dad, this one's a sure thing," he'd say. But every sure thing dissolved into debt. His daughter Cynthia had been even more infuriating. Bright and talented, she'd entered Stanford with dreams of politics. For a time, Beanie had been proud, his little girl at one of the nation's top universities. But by her junior year, she had dropped out to marry a wealthy California lawyer who promised her a life of luxury. She never returned to school, never worked a real job. Her life became a cycle of cocktail parties, country clubs, and yoga retreats, all funded indirectly by her father's empire. Then came the grandchildren. Some ways quiet, bookish, and artist. She loved her grandfather genuinely, visiting him on weekends even when her parents didn't bother. But she too was spoiled in comfort, shielded from the realities of the world. Over time, Benny began to see the rot spreading. Instead of building their own futures, his family waited for his death like wolves waiting for scraps. Conversations at family gatherings always turned to the estate, the inheritance, what Dad plans to leave behind. Even lawyers got involved, estate planners, tax advisors, circling him like vultures though he was still alive and breathing. One Christmas, when he overheard Michael whispering, "If the old man doesn't last much longer, we're set for life," something inside Benny snapped. He was not dead yet, and he refused to be treated as if he were. That was why, on a chilly October morning, the Callahan family woke up to see his words splashed across newspapers, magazines, and even digital ads on their phones. "Yes, it is me. I am sick to death of watching you lot fighting over my money. I am not dead yet. So here you go. I'm spending it. I am putting this message in every magazine I can find and will keep doing so until the money is gone. Then maybe you can stop all the bickering. Shame on you all. Signed simply, Benny Callahan." The shock was instantaneous. In New York, Michael nearly choked on his morning coffee as he read the Wall Street Journal headline. "Construction tycoon declares he's spending it all." His wife tried to calm him, but Michael's face burned red with fury. "He's humiliating us in public. Do you realize how insane this looks? Shareholders will think I'm part of this madness." In California, Cynthia shrieked when she saw the ad in the Los Angeles Times. "He can't do this. That money is supposed to take care of us." Her husband, sipping his smoothie, raised an eyebrow. "It's his money, darling." That only made her angrier. The grandchildren reacted with panic and disbelief. Brandon posted on social media, "My grandpa's lost his mind. Somebody stop him." Scott started calling lawyers. Leah, however, sat silently in her dorm room at UCLA, rereading the ad over and over. A small secret smile crossed her lips. She thought her grandfather had always been underestimated. Meanwhile, in his Chicago mansion, Benny sat in his leather armchair sipping black coffee. His caretaker, Allie, shuffled nervously into the room. "Mr. Callahan," she said softly, "your phone's been ringing nonstop. Michael's called 5 times already. Cynthia, too." "Let it ring," Benny said calmly, flipping through another magazine that carried his ad. "If they want to talk, they can come face me like adults." Allie hesitated. "You really meant it, didn't you? About spending everything?" Benny's smile was cold but satisfied. "Every last cent. I'd rather see fireworks, Ferraris, and scholarships for strangers than let my greedy children waste it." He looked out the window at the October leaves swirling in the wind. For the first time in decades, he felt free, alive. No longer the old man waiting for death. No longer the banker of spoiled heirs. The game had begun, and he intended to enjoy every moment of their outrage. The Callahan family was used to wealth, but they were not used to humiliation, and that was exactly how they felt the morning Benny's ad spread across America like wildfire. Cable news anchors mocked it with smirks. Talk shows laughed about the billionaire. Grandpa who finally snapped, Twitter, and Facebook lit up with memes, some admiring him, others poking fun at the greedy heirs who were now scrambling in panic. For a family that prided itself on respectability, this was a nightmare. But to Beanie Callahan it was delicious. Michael Callahan. In his Manhattan penthouse, Michael was pacing the floor with a glass of scotch in his hand, even though it was barely past noon. He had spent his life trying to carve a name for himself in business, but the truth was, without his father's money, he would never have lasted this long. At Yale he had studied business, but he was more devoted to his fraternity and rowing team than to lectures. He scraped through with average grades, graduating into a booming 1980s economy where anyone with connections could land a cushy job. Thanks to his father's name, he got hired by a top investment firm, but Michael was reckless. He loved expensive suits, power lunches, and the thrill of risky investments. In the 90s, he lost millions of client dollars on a failed tech startup. The only thing that saved him from ruin was Benny bailing him out, covering the debts quietly. Instead of gratitude, Michael felt entitled. "It's family money," he told himself. "It'll all be mine one day anyway." Now, as he read the ad again, his hands shook. "He's destroying everything," he muttered. His wife, Dana, perched nervously on the sofa, tried to soothe him. "Michael, maybe it's just a stunt. Your father always loved the spotlight." Michael slammed his glass down. "This isn't a stunt. He means it. And if he spends everything, do you know what that leaves us with? Nothing, not a damn thing." Cynthia Callahan. 3 time zones away in her Beverly Hills villa, Cynthia was equally outraged. She had lived in luxury since her 20s, marrying Robert, a high-profile attorney with a taste for golf clubs and fine wine. Cynthia had never finished her Stanford degree, political science, abandoned in favor of Pilates, social fundraisers, and private shopping trips on Rodeo Drive. Her father had given her the chance to be independent, but Cynthia had chosen dependency instead, floating from one lavish event to another, always confident the Callahan fortune would support her. Now she sat by her infinity pool, clutching her phone as she read the angry texts from her brother. "Michael, he's gone mad," Michael had written. "Michael, he's gone mad," Michael had written. "We need to stop him before it's too late." Cynthia called him immediately. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Robert says it's his money, but—" Michael cut her off. "Don't you get it? If he spends it, there's nothing left for us, nothing. He has to be declared incompetent. That's the only way." Cynthia swallowed hard. The idea of taking her father to court felt monstrous, but so did the thought of losing her luxurious lifestyle. She glanced around at her designer furniture, her sparkling pool, her closet full of clothes. Life without money? It was unthinkable. The grandchildren. Meanwhile, the younger generation exploded in different directions. Brandon, Michael's eldest son, had always lived like a prince. At Harvard, he was known for his arrogance, his tailored suits, and his ability to throw parties bigger than most weddings. But his arrogance had led to disaster when he was caught plagiarizing. his senior thesis. Harvard expelled him, and his family had hushed it up with lawyers and donations. Now 28, Brandon had no real job, no real purpose. He floated between nightclubs, posting Instagram photos of himself in private jets his father paid for. The inheritance was supposed to be his safety net. Without it, he was nothing. What the hell is Grandpa thinking? He raged to his girlfriend, scrolling through Twitter. He owes us. He built that fortune for us. Scott, the younger son, wasn't much better. He had barely graduated Princeton, known more for his gambling debts than his GPA. Now in his late 20s, he bounced between poker tournaments and startups that never lasted more than 6 months. This is bullshit, he told Brandon. We need to fight this. If he thinks he can waste it all, he's lost his mind. We should sue. Then there was Leah, Cynthia's daughter. She was different. At 22, Leah was studying art at UCLA. She had always been close to her grandfather, visiting him on weekends, listening to his stories about building bridges and skyscrapers. She wasn't perfect. She had grown up pampered, too, but she admired her grandfather's grit. Unlike the others, she wasn't angry when she read the ad. She was amused. He's finally teaching them a lesson, she whispered to herself. Good for him. Still, she worried what this would mean for the family. The first confrontation. 2 days later, the Callahans descended on Chicago like storm clouds. Michael flew in first, storming through the doors of Benny's mansion. Dad, what the hell are you doing? He barked. Benny, sitting in his armchair with a cigar, didn't even flinch. I'm spending my money, son. Isn't that what you wanted me to do? To use it wisely before I die? Not like this, Michael snapped. You're humiliating us. Do you know how this looks? To the business community? To my colleagues? Benny's laugh was sharp. Your colleagues? You mean the people you've been leeching? Off while waiting for me to kick the bucket? Spare me. Cynthia arrived soon after, tears in her eyes. Daddy, please. You can't do this. Think of the family name. Think of us. Benny's face hardened. That's the problem, Cynthia. I've thought of you all too much. Paid for your schools, your houses, your mistakes. And what have you given me in return? Nothing but greed. The grandchildren showed up next. Brandon and Scott shouted, threatened, even tried to guilt him. Leah stood in the back, silent, watching her grandfather with quiet admiration. The confrontation lasted hours. They begged, they argued, they even hinted at legal action. Benny listened to it all, smoking his cigar, eyes gleaming with a mix of amusement and fury. Finally, he stood. Enough. You've proven me right. Every word of that ad was true. You don't care about me. You care about my money. Well, guess what? You're not getting it. I'll burn it all before I give you 1 cent. His children froze. His words hit like a hammer. Benny leaned on his cane, towering over them despite his age. If you want to stop me, go ahead. Take me to court. Drag my name through the mud. But I promise you, every lawyer in this country knows I'm of sound mind. You'll lose. With that, he turned his back on them, dismissing them like spoiled children. Fallout, the family left in chaos. Michael plotted lawsuits. Cynthia cried herself to sleep. Brandon and Scott ranted online about injustice. Only Leah walked away thoughtful, her mind turning over what her grandfather had said. Beanie, meanwhile, sat back in his armchair, a sly smile tugging at his lips. They thought the ad was the end of it. But it was only the beginning. The Callahan mansion in Chicago had always been a symbol of stability. Built of solid brick and crowned with marble columns, it stood like a fortress of wealth and tradition. For decades, family dinners, Christmas gatherings, and milestone celebrations had filled its halls. But now those same halls echoed with arguments, slammed doors, and the whispers of a family tearing itself apart. Benny Callahan watched the chaos with a smirk. For years he had been silent while his children circled him like vultures. Now he was in control. The advertisement had been his first blow, but he wasn't finished. No, this was just the opening act. If his children wanted his fortune so badly, he decided they would have to play for it. The invitation. 3 weeks after the ad, each family member received a heavy cream-colored envelope, sealed with Benny's initials in gold. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You want my money? Prove you deserve it. Meet me at the mansion this Saturday at noon. Bring nothing but yourself, Benny. Michael nearly tore the letter in half. This is ridiculous, he shouted to Dana, waving the paper in her face. He's treating us like contestants on a game show. Cynthia, reading her own letter by the pool, called her brother in a panic. Michael, what if he's serious? What if he makes us compete for it? Then we play along, Michael snapped. Better that than watching him burn through everything. The grandchildren were equally shocked. Brandon posted a smug photo of the invitation on Instagram, captioned, "Grandpa's lost it. But hey, free money if I play his little game." Scott laughed it off but secretly planned to show up early. Leah, however, sat quietly in her UCLA dorm, the letter resting in her lap. Something told her this wasn't about money. It was about teaching them all a lesson. The first test. Saturday arrived gray and cold, the wind rattling the trees outside the mansion. The family gathered in the grand living room, an awkward silence hanging over them. They had dressed like they were attending a funeral. Dark suits, designer dresses, stiff expressions. Only Leah looked different, wearing jeans and a sweater, her expression calm. At exactly noon, Benny entered. He wore a tailored suit, his cane tapping against the polished floor. Allie, his caretaker, followed with a tray of envelopes. "Good afternoon," Benny said, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "I see greed as a powerful motivator. You've all come." Michael clenched his jaw. "Dad, what is this?" Benny ignored him. He gestured and Allie handed each family member an envelope. Inside was a single card with a handwritten riddle. "The man who builds with stone builds for centuries. The man who builds with words builds for generations. What have you built?" Cynthia frowned. "What does this even mean?" Benny smirked. "It means exactly what it says. Each of you has 10 minutes to answer. Write it down, be honest, then we'll see who deserves to inherit." They groaned, but they obeyed. Michael scribbled furiously, listing his failed businesses as if they were successes. Cynthia wrote about her family and community, connections, and Brandon, and Scott tried to spin nonsense about networking and influence. Leah sat quietly, then wrote a single line. "I haven't built much yet, but I hope to build art that outlives me." When they handed in their answers, Benny read each aloud. He laughed openly at Michael's inflated resume, shook his head at Cynthia's shallow words, and rolled his eyes at Brandon and Scott's arrogance. But when he read Leah's, he paused. For a moment, his sharp blue eyes softened. "At least one of you is honest," he muttered. Then he dropped the papers into the fireplace, watching them curl into ash. "Test 1, he said, "and already I see who understands the point. Public humiliation." But Benny wasn't satisfied with private games. He wanted the world to see just how ridiculous his family could be when chasing money. 2 weeks later, he arranged another challenge. This time he didn't keep it secret. He called a local journalist, leaked the story, and made sure cameras would be there. The family was horrified when they arrived at the mansion to see reporters lining the street. "What the hell is this, Dad?" Michael hissed, tugging at his tie. "You're making us a laughingstock." "Good," Beanie said with a grin. "Now you know how I've felt for years." The challenge was simple but humiliating. Each family member had to give a public speech outside the mansion on why they deserved his inheritance. Cynthia nearly fainted. Brandon laughed nervously. Scott muttered curses under his breath. Leah looked uncomfortable but calm. One by one, they stepped up to the microphone. Michael launched into a pompous speech about his business acumen, conveniently leaving out his failures. Cynthia rambled about being a pillar of society, though no one outside her gated community had ever heard of her. Brandon bragged about his networking skills and his future as an entrepreneur. Scott claimed he was a risk-taker who just needed seed money. The reporters snickered. Passers-by laughed openly. The Callahans were humiliated. Then Leah stepped up. Her voice was soft but steady. "I don't deserve his money. None of us do. We haven't earned it. If Grandpa wants to spend it, it's his right. If he leaves it to charity, that's his choice. Money isn't love. It doesn't buy respect. It doesn't replace family." The crowd fell silent. Cameras clicked furiously. Beanie's heart swelled with pride. Finally, one of them understood. Over the next month, Benny's tests grew stranger. He mailed them scavenger hunts through Chicago, forcing them to visit construction sites he had built decades ago. He made them clean graffiti off a bridge he'd once designed, while reporters filmed them. He handed them envelopes full of cash and told them to spend it in 24 hours, but only on strangers in need. Michael and Cynthia balked at every challenge, complaining of humiliation. Brandon and Scott tried to cheat, giving money to friends or hiring others to do the work. Leah, though uncomfortable, took each task seriously. She volunteered at shelters. She handed food to the homeless. She even painted murals on the walls of a youth center her grandfather had helped fund. Slowly, Benny's games were exposing the truth. His children and most of his grandchildren didn't want responsibility. They wanted wealth without effort. But Leah, quiet, humble Leah, was proving herself different. The more challenges Benny set, the more bitter the family became. Michael accused Cynthia of sabotaging him. Brandon and Scott nearly came to blows during one scavenger hunt. Each convinced the other was cheating. Cynthia began snapping at her husband, Robert, blaming him for not stepping in legally. The once glamorous Callahan family dinners became shouting matches. No one trusted anyone else, and all the while Benny watched with satisfaction. One evening, after weeks of chaos, the family gathered again at the mansion. Their faces were drawn, their patience worn thin. Benny rose slowly, leaning on his cane. "I've shown the world what you are," he said. "Spoiled, greedy, selfish. You've embarrassed yourselves, not me. I've built bridges that still stand, buildings that touch the sky. What have you built?" "Nothing but entitlement," Michael exploded. "This is abuse, Dad. You're destroying this family." Beanie's laugh was sharp as a whip. "I didn't destroy it. Greed did. All I've done is shine a light on it." The room fell silent. Beanie's eyes swept over them. His children, his grandchildren, all but one. His gaze lingered on Leah, and for the first time in years he felt hope. "Games are over," he said. The real fun, the Callahan mansion, had never felt colder. The once vibrant rooms, once alive with polished laughter and forced politeness, now reeked of tension and bitterness. Every ornate chandelier, every marble pillar, every oil painting of long-dead ancestors seemed to glare at the family that gathered beneath them. Michael paced the living room, his face red, his voice sharp. "This has gone too far. First riddles, then scavenger hunts, then public humiliation. Dad's lost his mind." Cynthia sat stiffly on the velvet sofa, arms crossed. "He's making us clowns. Everyone in Chicago is talking about us. Do you know what people at the club are whispering? That we're desperate. That we're beggars." Brandon, slouched in a chair with his phone, didn't look up. "To be fair, you kind of are." Scott chuckled but quickly went silent when Michael shot him a glare, and then there was Leah, standing quietly near the window. Unlike the others, she didn't seem angry. She looked thoughtful. "Set even?" The doors opened. Allie, the caretaker, stepped in first, carrying a folder. Behind her came Benny, his cane striking rhythmically against the floor. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes gleamed with mischief. "Good evening," he said. "Shall we get started?" He motioned for Allie to hand out copies of the document inside the folder. The Callahans grabbed them eagerly, scanning the legal language. Michael's face went pale. "What the hell is this? It's my new will," Benny said simply, lowering himself into his armchair. "And it is final." Cynthia gasped. "You're donating 90% of the estate?" Scott dropped his copy onto the table. "This has to be a joke." But Beanie only smirked. "Do I look like I'm joking?" The room erupted. "You can't do this," Michael roared. "This money belongs to the family." "No," Benny corrected, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "It belongs to me. I earned it. I built it. And I'll damn well do what I want with it." Cynthia's voice shook. "You'd rather give it away to strangers than your own children?" "Yes," Benny said without hesitation. For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the room. "You think I don't know what you are," he said. "Michael, you've run businesses into the ground and come crawling back to me for handouts. Cynthia, you've spent decades pretending to be high society while living off my money. Brandon, Scott, you waste everything you touch, chasing luxury and Instagram followers." His voice grew colder. "You've all proven time and again that you don't deserve this fortune. And the last few months, you proved it to the entire city." Michael's face twisted. "So what, you'll just hand it over to charity? To people who don't even know you?" Benny's eyes narrowed. "To people who actually need it. To fund scholarships, hospitals, art programs. To repair the bridges and buildings I designed decades ago. To leave behind something that matters." He paused, then added, Because unlike you, I care about legacy. Michael slammed his fist on the table.
This is theft.
I'll contest it in court. Benny's laugh was sharp and cruel. Go ahead. Waste your time, waste your money. I've hired the best lawyers in the country. You'll lose. Cynthia's voice cracked. What about loyalty, Dad? Don't we mean anything to you? Benny leaned back in his chair, a tired smile tugging at his lips. You mean a lot to me. But the truth is, money ruined you. Maybe this way. I'll save what's left of you before it's too late, Scott sneered. And what about Leah? Let me guess, she gets the other 10%? Benny glanced at Leah, who stiffened. Not exactly. Leah gets something better than money. She gets choice. Leah blinked, confused. What do you mean? You'll see, he said cryptically. The following week, Benny went further. He didn't just finalize the will. He announced it publicly. At a press conference, held downtown, he stood before cameras and reporters, his family sitting stiffly behind him, forced to witness the spectacle. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady despite his age. I am Benjamin Callahan. For 60 years, I built this city, bridges, buildings, parks. I made money, yes. Too much money. But money has a way of rotting a family from the inside. I've seen it firsthand. Reporters leaned forward eagerly, pens scratching. So I've decided to do something better. 90% of my fortune will be donated to Chicago and beyond, to hospitals, schools, art programs, environmental restoration. The rest I leave in the hands of someone I trust. Not because she begged for it, but because she didn't. The cameras flashed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Michael's face was red with fury. Cynthia looked on the verge of tears. Brandon and Scott shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how pathetic they must look in the public eye. Leah, sitting quietly at the end of the row, kept her eyes down, embarrassed by the spectacle but unable to hide a flicker of pride. Fallout? The news spread like wildfire. Headlines blared. Callahan fortune to charity, family furious. Greedy heirs. One honest grandchild stands. Out amid scandal. Social media exploded with memes mocking the Callahan children. Videos of Michael's red-faced outburst went viral. Cynthia became a laughingstock at her country club. Brandon and Scott were trolled relentlessly online. Leah, however, received unexpected attention. Strangers praised her speech, her humility, her honesty. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. But she also felt uneasy. While her cousins fumed, she couldn't shake the guilt that her grandfather had singled her out as the worthy one. She didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted peace, a private moment. One evening, Leah visited her grandfather privately. He was sitting in his study, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring at a portrait of her late grandmother. You really meant it, didn't you? She asked softly. Benny nodded. Every word. Money destroys people. It destroyed your father and aunt long ago. I won't let it destroy you. But why me? Leah asked. I'm not special. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm still figuring it out. Benny smiled faintly. That's exactly why. You're not chasing the money. You're chasing meaning. That's worth more than any fortune. For the first time, Leah saw her grandfather not as the cold, calculating patriarch, but as a tired old man, desperate to fix what had gone wrong before it was too late. The breaking point. But the rest of the family wasn't finished. Michael hired lawyers determined to contest the will. Cynthia rallied her social circle, spreading rumors about Leah being manipulated into siding with Benny. Brandon and Scott plotted to leak family secrets to the tabloids in exchange for cash. The Callahan name, once prestigious, was spiraling into disgrace. Benny watched it all with grim satisfaction. This was the final blow, not just to their greed, but to their illusions. Let the world see them for who they are, he muttered one night to Allie. It's the only way they'll ever learn. On the night before the official signing of the will, the mansion was eerily quiet. The family had gathered once more. Tension so thick it felt like smoke in the air. Michael glared at his father. This isn't over. Benny raised his glass. Oh, I know. It's only beginning, and with that, he smirked. The kind of smirk that promised more chaos. More lessons, more revenge still to come. The family didn't realize it yet. But the real storm was about to break. The Callahan mansion was quieter than ever, But it was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of tension, of waiting, of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. After Beanie's explosive press conference, and the shocking announcement of his will, the family had fractured completely. Michael was furious beyond reason. He had retained a team of expensive lawyers. Convinced he could prove his father mentally incompetent, he stormed in and out of the mansion daily, waving documents, shouting at. Late at night, she sat in her dorm room, staring at her phone, overwhelmed by messages she couldn't answer. She wanted to disappear, to crawl back into anonymity, but she couldn't, because her grandfather had chosen her. And deep down, she knew he was right. Benny Callahan had always been larger than life, commanding, sharp, unyielding. But in the weeks following the press conference, his health began to falter. He was still fiery in spirit, still cracking jokes at his children's expense, but his body was betraying him. The cane he leaned on became less an accessory and more a necessity. His hands shook when he poured whiskey. His voice grew hoarser, thinner. Leah noticed first. She visited him one evening, finding him slumped in his study, struggling to catch his breath. "Grandpa," she said softly, "you should see a doctor." "I've seen enough doctors," he muttered, waving her off. "What I need is to finish my work before time runs out." "Work?" He tapped a thick leather notebook on his desk. "Plans, donations, projects. I'm not leaving this world with loose ends. Not after what I've started." Leah glanced at the notebook, filled with pages of handwritten notes, lists of organizations, architectural sketches. He wasn't just giving his money away blindly. He was building something lasting. "You're not just donating," she whispered. "You're designing another legacy." His lips curved into a faint smile. "Now you're starting to understand." Michael wasn't going to let things end quietly. He dragged his siblings into court, contesting the will. He accused Benny of elder abuse, of being manipulated by Leah. He painted his father as senile, unstable, incapable of rational decisions. The case attracted national attention. Reporters packed the courtroom. Every word was quoted in headlines, every expression caught on camera. Benny insisted on testifying despite his frailty. He walked into the courtroom leaning heavily on his cane, but his eyes burned with defiance. "I may be old," he said, his voice trembling but clear, "but I am not senile. My son is a failure not because I didn't give him money, but because I gave him too much. I will not make the same mistake again. If he thinks I'm incompetent, he's welcome to believe it. But incompetence doesn't build skyscrapers. It doesn't leave bridges standing 50 years later. It doesn't design cities." The courtroom fell silent. Michael's lawyers fumbled. The judge dismissed the contest in a matter of weeks. The will stood, but the damage to the Callahan name was complete. The family's dirty laundry had been aired for the entire nation to see. As Benny's health worsened, Leah visited him daily. One evening, she found him staring out the window, the city skyline glowing in the distance. "You know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "when your grandmother died, I thought about ending it all. She was the only one who kept me human, the only one who reminded me money isn't." "I failed my children," he continued. "I gave them everything but discipline. I thought I was helping them, but I was feeding the fire. I turned them into beggars in designer suits. That's my sin." Tears pricked Leah's eyes. She had never seen her grandfather so vulnerable. "But you," he said, turning to her, "you remind me of her. The honesty, the humility. You see people as people, not as assets or obstacles. That's why I chose you, not to inherit money, to inherit responsibility." She swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can do it." "You can," he said firmly, "because you don't want it. That's what makes you different." It happened quietly on a rainy Tuesday morning. Allie found him in his bed, the leather notebook resting on his chest, a faint smile on his face. He had gone in his sleep. The news spread instantly. Benjamin Callahan dead at 84. Newspapers ran obituaries praising his architectural achievements, his philanthropy, his dramatic final years. Some called him eccentric, others called him visionary. The funeral was massive. Politicians, business leaders, artists, and ordinary citizens attended. Thousands of people whose lives had been touched by his buildings, his donations, or his late-life generosity came to pay respects. But in the front row sat his family, stiff and bitter. Michael glared through the service, furious that the spotlight had been stolen from him. Cynthia wept. But her tears were more about her own ruined reputation than her father. Brandon and Scott scrolled through their phones, barely paying attention. And then there was Leah. She sat quietly, holding the leather notebook, tears streaming silently down her face. After the funeral, the family gathered once more in the mansion for the final reading of the will. The lawyer opened the document, his voice steady. To my children, Michael and Cynthia, you have already received more from me than you deserved. I leave you nothing more than the lessons I hope you will one day learn. Michael nearly exploded, but the lawyer continued. To my grandsons, Brandon and Scott, may you learn that wealth without work is poison. I leave you nothing but my disappointment. Both young men groaned audibly. Finally, the lawyer turned to Leah. To my granddaughter Leah, I leave you my remaining 10%, not to spend recklessly, but to use as seed money for the projects outlined in my notebook. You are free to reject it if the burden is too heavy, but if you accept, you will carry forward what your grandmother and I once dreamed, that wealth should serve people, not enslave them. The room was silent. All eyes turned to Leah. She clutched the notebook tightly, heart pounding. The months that followed were brutal. Michael, Cynthia, Brandon, and Scott retreated further into bitterness. They gave interviews blasting Benny, claiming the will was unfair, painting themselves as... She discovered she had her grandfather's stubbornness, her grandmother's compassion. She learned to say no, to make hard decisions, to carry the weight of responsibility. And in time, the city came to see her not as the granddaughter of a wealthy man, but as a leader in her own right. Years later, standing on a bridge her grandfather had designed, Leah watched children playing below, their laughter echoing through the city. She thought about everything he had done, the pain, the chaos, the revenge, but also the hope. He hadn't been kind, not always, but he had been right. Money could destroy, or it could build, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure it built. In the end, Benjamin Callahan didn't just take revenge on his greedy family. He gave them a mirror and forced them to see what they had become. And while they turned away in shame, one granddaughter chose to face it. And that choice changed everything.